Good morning, Julia.
Hi Ben.
So we were just talking, weren't we, about the northern slopes and the bits you're doing here. We've been doing it for years, haven't we? But my first question is, what was it like growing up around here, and what was your first memory of nature?
Right, well actually I didn't grow up around here. We moved to Bristol when I was about 10, 11. I grew up partly nomadic lifestyle because my father was in the forces, but I spent some really nice time up in Shropshire.
Okay, yeah.
So we lived a couple of different places there, and it was just open air, fields, nature. It just completely surrounded us. We were in an army camp, so we were sort of like pushed out to the outskirts of the town anyway, because that's how it was then. Yeah, and then we went slightly into the town, and they still had lots of nature in the town. We had a beautiful graveyard. I always remember the graveyard. So you had the graveyard. It was had benches, but it had loads of wildlife, and it was sort of like semi-parkland, and it was beautiful. It was a lovely place to go.
Well tended to.
Yeah. And then we had Victoria Park, which was the formal town park in there. And one of the memories was actually a bit poignant of the time. Prince Philip landed in a helicopter.
Wow!
Yeah. So
yeah, that's right on the money, isn't it?
Yeah.
With current things,
very current. So yeah, so it's just, to me, that was the real world. So to come to the city with the congestion, not so much congestion, but like the densification seemed more apparent because we'd had sort of open sites and things like that before.
Where did you move to in Bristol?
We were sadly nomadic again, so moved to quite a few different places, including, a couple of places that just weren't very nice at all. Yeah. So it wasn't a nice time for our family when we first moved here. Yeah. But we eventually moved up to the top of Linvale, which was just Knoll then.
What experiences in nature have you had then, Julia, that have benefited you personally? Or maybe after that as well, that have benefited the community?
Yeah, going back to growing up in Shropshire, we did have the open fields and just appreciated everything. My father used to take me out and show me, bread and cheese was the early hawthorn.
Hawthorn, yeah.
Yeah. And some of the things that you can eat, some of the things that you can't eat, and just how to interpret people as well. Because in Shropshire we had a fair bit of Romany people.
Yeah.
Some of them were really good, and some of them were not so good.
Same as
so
every
it's how
population
to,
of
exactly,
people.
how to suss people out really, and look after yourself. So that was the main thing. So yeah, so really it's that sort of set my standard, and everything that's sort of come on since then has been followed on from then. So
how did it benefit you being out in nature? What those things you were talking a minute ago, weren't you, about like walking your dog and that? What effect does it have?
Yeah, because the next move we made was into the edge of the town, and then we had our freedom. It sounds like an old cliche now, but you could go out and spend 4 hours just wandering about. We had to learn where we could go because there was some affluent landowners around, but some things were permissible, some things weren't. We went into a wood, and there were thousands and thousands of primroses, and we'd pick them for our mums, and then you'd have bluebells and you could pick those, and they were dead by the time you got home, but you're a kid so it didn't matter. You'd smell the clean air, you'd have that sense of freedom, you'd learn so many life skills that you don't even know that you're learning, regarding people, regarding the traffic, regarding land ownership, farms, going on farms, farm animals, what you can and can't do, or should or shouldn't do. Even allotments got chased one day because we were picking some raspberries. We thought they were wild, and it was somebody's allotment that had grown through the fence and all that. So, hey, get off my land!
Phone the police.
Yeah.
I think like what you're saying. That's just what I was going to say a second ago. It's like that kind of stuff when you're growing up. You've already spoken a little bit about that, and it's obvious that has impacted what you've ended up doing later on in life. Those experiences when you were younger in nature have stayed with you. Because I mean, obviously I didn't know that you were living in Shropshire growing up. But when you moved here, what was it? Because this area, and this is how I've got to know you through looking after the northern slopes and this space, and obviously living down the road in Bedminster. What was it that got you involved in looking after
Well, having the children young, I was using the spaces. Having dogs, we've always had dogs. I've used the spaces, sometimes slightly differently. Looking out onto the novers, as I say, that was you know, my green backdrop. Yeah, my fix it was. Yeah, and it stopped me feeling like I was being, you know, lived in the middle of the city. And we still had lots of green with the gardens and everything around, so no problem, until one day we hear that developers think they'd like to start building houses on the novers. So we ended up getting caught up with a group at the time. Then we made a small group ourselves, a few people. How long ago was this? That was the very end of the 80s. Okay. And so then started getting into what you would call the political side of things, really, getting engrossed into that. So it went through the stages, and it ended up as a public inquiry, and that was a lot of growing up for me because I'd never stood up in front of people. And but when you've got a subject that you're passionate about, I suppose, and fairly knowledgeable about, then it sort of comes a little bit easier. Anyway, we did actually win that public inquiry. The inspector came down in our favour, and any appeal was quashed afterwards. So that really got me into doing things like this. And then somebody says, oh, let's go and do a litter pick. And then you find yourself saying, shall we do a litter pick? So then you start, you know, you start taking the reins a little bit, and then somebody calls on you, you know, can you do this? Shall we do this? Shall we do that? Then a little bit later on, there was some public money, some council money, up at Knowle, and it was to improve like social welfare, really, behind it. And so went up to that because they were talking about open spaces, and then I went up as, you know, because I like the novers. Somebody went up because they liked Kenmare Roadway. Somebody else went up because they liked the Bommy. So bit by bit we all sort of came together and thought it may be an asset to lump them all together as one site, well, under one name, like umbrella name, and that way, you know, we could sort of steer things, steer some money, steer some improvements, and steer some better names, you know, better.
So that was how the Northern Slopes Initiative was born, this community initiative that looked after the slopes.
Yeah.
What? And so the thing with that, so with this particular question, this is how I got to know you. Like, you're tirelessly working on conserving, conservation of this place, and it's amazing getting other people, local people involved. What kind of impact do you think it has on local people getting out on the slopes in spaces that, you know, you lot are volunteering to keep looking lovely, and it looks absolutely beautiful, and obviously we'll see it at some point with the camera. What do you think it does to them? Like, how does it help them?
I think it's sort of, being out in nature actually feeds the soul. With COVID, we've had so many more people now are appreciating their open spaces. They've actually, the reputation of all these spaces on the Northern Slopes has massively changed. We've been on this site now and just over the road in Glynvale for over 10 years now, I joined when I retired. I needed something to do, so I thought this is ideal way of getting, you know, even more work done on the slopes, etc. So I actually enjoy the keep fit side of it, so to speak. Getting your hands dirty, being out in nature, and then gradually drawing people in.
So, what kind of things then, Julia, do you do that helps, that personally that you do that helps like people in planning, or what other people can do?
Like when we're at home, always use like little bits of plastic. Always use a plastic bag at least twice. Be very mindful of how much plastic we use because it's so destructive, obviously. When I come round to works like this, what we do is we cut down. We can't have it taken away, so what we do is make different habitats. We've got a couple of high binoculars over here.
So when you say you cut down, you're cutting down vegetation and trees? And...
Yeah, sometimes fallen trees we have to saw up. So we make bench seats out of those that came down in the hurricane.
Very comfortable as well.
Yeah, always good for a little perch and a little picnic area as well. We've cut down, we keep the grass cut down, which the council did, cleared for the slow worms that are over here, so we sort of manage that area for them. We've got do dead hedging when we cut down the trees and some of the vegetation. That actually attracts, you know, more night species in particular. We've got a lot more butterflies over here now and things like that. We do piles, which is good for lots of bugs.
So piles,
we've got a bit of a piles of vegetation. So we do piles in little corners here, there and everywhere. That is really good for conserving water. It stops the soil drying out. It also gives rise to lots of bugs and beasts, some of which aren't even catalogued. So we just find them, record them, and started feeding into the Burke recording system as well when we get something really interesting. Really, it's sort of just keeping in mind that the planet's a very fragile place now, and if we've got anything that can be recycled, a lot of these stones around here have come from a builder just up the road who had lots of spare scree, so he said, yeah, I'll bag it up for you, so we've had loads of that.
Everything that you're utilising here is at the moment either growing in nature and then it's going back to the earth, because you're repurposing, or completing that cycle.
It's the whole cycle, because you can't have the stripped earth and then expect everything else to grow above it. So you have to feed the soil, feed the air, feed the trees, feed the beasts.
And then you get the habitat.
And then the creatures come and they start completing the cycle.
And then the humans come because they can see all the stuff that you're doing and make it look beautiful and the work you're putting in.
And they can actually feed. They can actually feed from it as well. As I can say, go back to bread and cheese with the hawthorn plants, but there's loads of berries over here. We've done a little bit of planting, so we've got the mini orchard up there. We've got fruit, but we've also planting hazel, so you get your nuts, and then there's beech, which you get your nuts.
There's loads of stuff.
There's elder, so there's foraging for people, but foraging for wildlife. So we're benefiting all species, not just ourselves. If you can be at grassroots level like that with recycling, looking after the nature and looking after the planet, I think a lot of it at home comes naturally. So you say, fold up the cardboard, use the cardboard for something like this, use your bag 2 or 3 times, take your bag shopping with you, use glass bottles when you can, and sort of reduce your plastic usage, or make sure that it's like recycled plastic that you're using. And
I guess the thing that links it all though is again, it's that all of this stuff that you're doing, not only does it benefit nature, it benefits us.
It benefits the human race, it benefits us personally though.
Exactly.
Why would I need to buy bags when I've got bags that I'm so say throwing away?
Why do you need to buy containers to put your whatever in your bits and bobs, your pasta and your whatever in if you bother doing it? Do you know what I mean?
You can buy a nice glass jar and then that's it, you've
buy
got it once.
Buy your jar and then you've got the jar then to, you know, to keep using.
Yeah.
What kind of things have helped you over lockdown, Julie? Like, whether that be physically, mentally, whatever it is. Any tips for other people?
For me it was just getting out and about. First of all, when we were first locked down, I thought, how can I make this work? We were only so say allowed out once a day, so I thought, how do I make this work? So having 3 dogs that were field dogs, there was no way that I could keep them in. It was just actually cruel for them. But you know, we couldn't have lived in that atmosphere where the dogs are climbing the walls. So every day I used to take them out. So I used to take them out very early so that there were no people about, and explored a couple of new larger areas. And one was very beneficial, that you could be hundreds of yards away from the next walker out, you know, with their dogs and things like that. So, and then we had a large garden, so obviously I was doing even more gardening and making the garden prim and proper. And then making sure that I went out with my husband as well, because he needed to get out. He was feeling a bit imprisoned, and he was, you know, he was isolating for a few weeks, and then he decided enough was enough, you know, he couldn't handle it anymore. So it was finding places where people just weren't, and that was our coping mechanism really. What I did do, I put a couple of times, I went for a walk in the woods and used my phone, and I put that on social media and just asked people if they wanted to join me on a walk in the woods, and I got a lot of really positive feedback on that. Because people were shielding and said, well, we can't get out, but I felt like I was with you, and things like that. So that was a nice way of putting things back that, you know, I could actually do positively for people.